Hello, Brian. How are you?
I'm good. Hi, Lauren. How are you?
Good. Welcome, everyone. I'm Lauren Van Hemert from RDU on Stage. I am here with the amazingly talented Brian Westbrook. I'm such a fan of your work. I think Gentleman's Guide was one of the, I've said this to you before, but I think your performance in Gentleman's Guide at RLT was one of the best performances I've seen. It was amazing, genius.
Thank you.
So, welcome. Thanks for hanging out with me tonight.
Anytime, every time, all the time.
Thank you. Thank you. um, so, I want to talk a little bit about your background. And for those of you who didn't see Dustin Britt's interview with Brian last May. I can't even believe it was last May at this point. But that gives a lot of background on Brian, and we're not going to talk a whole lot about the acting and background stuff. So if you want to see all the background stuff, go tune into that. I'll put a link in the notes. But I do want to ask you, were you a theater kid? Did you grow up performing? Did you grow up? I know you went to App State, you studied piano, you studied voice, you studied all sorts of things, but were you a theater kid?
So I was a theater kid in the sense that from a very early age, I had a great love of musical theater that was certainly encouraged by my parents and family. But we didn't have theater that much. We had some summer theater growing up. I didn't actually do much of it because for whatever reason, I was off doing other things, I think, when I was a kid. And we had very little theater. I think we did 2, maybe 3 plays when I was in high school, no musicals. But I quietly, on my own in my room, cultivated a very deep passion for musical theater from 5th grade. I very clearly remember the moment it happened was when I saw Little Shop of Horrors on TV in 5th grade.
Yes. I love Little Shop of Horrors. That would be, have you played that role? Have you played the role of Seymour?
No, I haven't. I have, I've played in The Pit. I have assistant directed it. I have done several numbers from it, but I've actually never been on stage in the production.
Oh, I'd love to see you in that production.
I'm ready.
Somebody do the show so Brian can play. Actually, I think you should just play all the parts because you just a one man Little Shop of Horrors.
Well, in the original Broadway and off-Broadway production, most of the ensemble is played by one person, and so it's very Gentleman's Guide like, somebody who's donning different costumes and very quickly changing. Most of the time when it's done now, it's expanded out, so you've got more people on stage, which is great. But I would love to play all the characters.
Yes. Now I did see you the last time I saw you on stage virtually. You were in Buyer and Seller. Oh my gosh, it really gave me such a laugh. The McGregor Center is beautiful. Yeah. So, in fact, when you did that interview with Dustin, you were at a theater, and I was so jealous.
Yeah, that was. It was still really early on. Yeah, and I remember we were rehearsing there. And I was like, "This is perfect. I get to do it from a and be on stage." That was. I have to thank Mark Hopper a lot for that, because that was a lovely experience to do that.
And it was it was also an amazing performance. I mean, when you get on stage, whether it's something like Gentleman's Guide, something like Buyer and Seller, I feel like your comedic timing is just on point. So I love to watch you on stage. I also appreciated that production because I think at the time, so many theaters were trying to be filmmakers. And that was definitely a theater experience. It was, you didn't get the sense that McGregor was trying to make a film. They were recreating theater.
Yeah. And I think we've seen a great mix, a lot of really great innovation in this past year. But I think, for me, a lot of times at that point, because it was earlier on, it was important to Mark and myself to cling to as much of the live theater experience as we could, just because we knew that's what was going away. You know, we still had film and television, but the live theater experience was going away. So
have you seen, I know you love musical theater like I do. Have you seen the Irish Rep production of Meet Me in St. Louis?
No. Is it on Broadway HD or somewhere?
It's go to the Irish Rep website. They did it in December. Now they're doing it again through February. And it shows you how much Zoom has advanced, because you've got all these actors in all these different places, but they've edited it together to look like they're all in the same
neat
set.
And Meet Me in St. Louis, like nobody ever does that. That's awesome.
I know. And it's good. It's a good production. We were talking about My Fair Lady, Shireen Ahmed, who is the current Eliza Doolittle. When they go back on tour, she was the understudy for Laura Benanti in Lincoln Center production. She plays Esther. She's brilliant. Her voice is brilliant. And so it's worth seeing. So everyone go to Irish Rep and watch Me and St. Louis. So good. Such a musical. I call shows like that musical crack, because that's what they are for me. They just
it's a gem of a show. It really is.
It's like a drug. In Byron Cellar, you played, for people who don't know what that's about, you played a gay out of work actor who ends up getting a job managing
Barbra Streisand's basement.
Storefront in Barbra Streisand's basement.
Yeah. It is a fictional story about a real place that Barbra Streisand came out with a book.
Yes.
Yeah, and where she did a sort of pictorial of her estate, which included this underground mall that she had set up in her basement.
Which is crazy to me. I mean, we should all have a mall in our basement right now. But you've also have appeared in Mothers and Sons and some more dramatic pieces. I Am My Own Wife. Before we went on camera, we were talking about the prom. And I kind of want to talk about the prom for a second, because I loved the show, The Prom. I saw it on Broadway the night I went. I had no idea what it was about. I really went in blindly. At that point, nobody was talking about it. Nobody knew what it was about. And I loved it. But one of the things I loved so much about it was the original Broadway cast. And I know I'm going to pronounce his last name wrong. Brooks Ashmanskas.
Yeah.
Thank you. As Barry, I thought he deserved a Tony Award for that role. He was so funny and so good. And the role was written for him. So when James Corden took this role in the movie version, there was some controversy because James Corden is not gay. And the character in this production, this character Barry, he is a gay actor diva who goes to this small town to rescue this girl who wants to take her girlfriend to the prom. Brooks was amazing in the part. James Corden didn't. I'm a huge fan of James Corden's. In this particular role, he did not do it for me. But you had posted something on your Facebook page about representation and representation being so important on stage. So I guess, could you speak to why representation and inclusion is so important? And for people who maybe don't understand, not that we're going to change people's minds, but for people who just don't understand where the controversy was in the first place, maybe kind of enlighten some people on what the conversation is about when it comes to casting non-gay people in a gay role.
Yeah. So I also I did not see the show on Broadway, but I saw the movie and I loved the show. I loved the cast album. I love that story, and I had several issues with the film, but the one that I chose to sort of speak about was, and to be honest, I referred to it as gay face when I posted it on Facebook, which is a term that I wrestle with, and I think it might be reductive. It might even be, at worst, appropriating. But what I was referring to was, in its simplest terms, straight actors being cast in gay roles, but not just gay roles, but roles where a person's gayness is central to the plot. It's central to the development of the character, and certain actors then putting on certain attributes to then display or perform, quite frankly, being gay. So that's what I was referring to with that term. And I think that there are two conversations about this that kind of overlap for me, because I think there's the question about performance or performers and who should be, quote unquote, allowed to play certain roles, which is murky and muddy, and I don't have answers for that. But then I think what's more of the conversation I'm more interested in having is an audience perspective. And I talked about this too, and I thought, about when I was growing up as a young closeted gay boy in the South, the roles and the things that I saw, in pop culture and in media that affected me. And most of the time back in the early 80s and into the 90s, there was very, very, very little representation of any LGBTQIA folks on anywhere in pop culture. And what there was always disparaging or tragic. That was it. It was either a tragic story where someone experiences tragedy because they're gay or different, or someone is there to provide a buffoonish laugh. And that doesn't instill a sense of self-respect that most of, particularly straight cis white culture gets to experience in media growing up. So all that being said, when I saw The Prom, it just brought it back up again for me, because I've thought about it a lot, and the thing that I keep coming back to is that there is a lack of representation of gay performers. There is an increase now. We've got a lot more gay roles. I say gay, I mean really LGBTQIA, all of those. So all of that is the representation is going up, but the performers aren't necessarily always getting to be the stewards of those stories. And then, sometimes when they are, they're always lauded for being so brave, for playing these gay roles. And, Screen Actors Guild did a study not even 2 years ago where they said that it is still widely, believed that it is a detriment to a person's career, or puts a person's career at risk if they come out of the closet. And you don't have to really think too hard to realize that there are not, when we think about celebrity, and I'm really talking about film and television here, because representation in theater is different, and I'd like to talk about that, but it is I think a different thing. Mm-hmm. But in film and television, and celebrity and fame at that level, there is a large, just noticeable gap and missing population of people who aren't there. And I just can't help but believe it's because it is still because of a lack of understanding, and it's discrimination, and it's still just a touch point in our culture where people think that it's not marketable, or people are going to, once you come out, you then can no longer play straight roles. And I think that happens a lot.
Which is crazy to me. The really interesting thing, you have movies like The Boys in the Band, which was a play and a movie. now a remade movie that I think came out during this pandemic, kind of early on during the
The
pandemic or
movie did,
just
yeah.
before, right? The movie.
Yeah.
And it was a cast of all gay men actors who identify as gay, which seemed groundbreaking because the original roles, the original production, there that wasn't the case. The original production on Broadway in the 60s or whenever that was. Or they didn't want to come out because they were afraid. So I think, looking at 2020, you think that we're so beyond this, but it's shocking that we're not.
No, I mean, and when you think about that play, that piece, it is the characters, their gayness is central to how that works, and it's not all pleasant. Again, some of that even because it was also of its time written there too, and in part written as a reaction to gay culture and when it was written too. But yeah,
it's interesting to me. I feel like also in the prom, that whole character, his whole persona is the foundation is based on the fact that he's a gay actor. And so it would have been nice to see that represented on screen, just like it was. There's an authenticity there that I think is missing.
Well, so there's a because, and not just a gay actor, but a gay person, a gay man, because part of that storyline is the reconciliation that he has with his parents, and so it is. James Corden's never had to go through that. He's never had to go through that. Now, that does not mean that you can't play the role of somebody who has had experiences that you have not had. Sir Anthony Hopkins was, to my knowledge, never a serial killer or a cannibal, but his performance as Hannibal Lecter.
Are you acting crazy?
but I think when I'm talking about these, LGBTQIA roles, this is a marginalized community. So in the conversation about who should or should not be cast, how can you tell the story effectively? And it's just always going to be a bit of an easier leap for someone who has lived that kind of experience to get there. Now, if they're not a skilled performer, if they're not a skilled actor, then they're going to lose on other levels. But I think that it's worth asking the question, because then it gets to the other part too. Then is like, you can't tell me that you can't go out there and find a gay identifying actor that could do that role as well, if not better than James Corden. I know that you could.
Hire Brooks.
Hire Brooks. Exactly.
Guys, if you've seen the movie The Prom, and I love the story. I love the Broadway production. Just Google Brooks's performance of Barry's Going to Prom. That'll tell you everything you need to know. It was brilliant. And I wish they would have used more of the Broadway cast. I mean, this is a whole other conversation, but I wish they would have used the whole Broadway cast in the movie, because I think Broadway actors are often overlooked.
Meryl Streep can do anything. I don't know that she should do everything. I think Beth Level could have gone on there and really, our North Carolina girl, Beth Level, could have gone on there and killed it.
She would have. And the interesting thing about the parents' storyline, the reconciliation with Barry's parents, that wasn't in the Broadway show. That was written in for the movie. That the Broadway show really focused on Emma and her story and her arc and Dee Dee's arc as well. But and the relationship of her and Barry. Barry became kind of the surrogate father, surrogate uncle figure, but the reconciliation piece wasn't there. So I found that interesting too, to write that in when you have a straight actor portraying the role. Something else that I wanted to talk to you about and everyone, don't come at me. Brian and I, we spoke prior to this, so I'm not like hitting him with all these crazy questions without his knowledge that I'm going to hit him with the crazy questions. Something else I really do want to talk to you about is addiction and your road to recovery. A couple years ago, Bo Clark, I interviewed him. A lot of you may remember Bo Clark. He was a member of the acting community here, the performing arts community, wonderful actor. And he's moved. He moved to Utah, and I think it's Utah, to work at an addiction center there, recovery program there. Before he left, we spoke about his recovery journey, and he was so candid, and we did a podcast interview. And when I told you before we went on air, when I published that podcast, the response was unbelievable. In fact, I would say in the 87 podcast interviews I've done, that one received the biggest response because people were thankful that we were talking about it. So I do want to have this conversation with you. Talk to me a little about your journey with, and I don't even want to say addiction, I want to say recovery, because we talked a little bit about the fact that you're in 12-step recovery. You said it better than I do, but talk to me about your journey.
Yeah, sure. Well, I appreciate you, and I applaud you for having the conversations too. I'm not surprised that you got that kind of reaction previously, because it's something that's not talked about enough. Because the stigma is still out there. So I am currently in long-term recovery and 12-step recovery from drug and alcohol addiction, and addiction is part of that. So yeah, I'm in recovery, but I am an addict and an alcoholic, and I have been for as long as I can remember. But like with any other sort of health journeys, particularly mental health journeys, or health issues that are not quite as understood as others, it's not a straight line. To recovery, and it can be very, very bumpy. And for me, I really started. I started my sort of road recognizing that I had a problem, and then starting to try and fix it way back in like 2007, 2008, when I was still living in Ohio, and I was working for a theater company up there, and I just was spiraling, and I had a support system there, but it wasn't a professional support system equipped to deal with addiction, and so took some steps there, fell a couple back, moved to North Carolina, and did all right for a while, and then really kind of crashed and burned hardcore after I moved back. It was a big change, and I just didn't have the foundation that I needed, and did not understand. Most importantly, I didn't understand addiction. I didn't understand what it was that my body, brain, and spirit was going through. And so then I really started to make serious strides and serious attempts around 2011, and that's when I found 12-step recovery, and learned a lot more, and learned the truth, which is that it is a progressive disease, and that untreated, that I was going to die. So the two things I had to know right away, or as soon as possible, was I had to know and believe that it was a progressive disease and that it was going to kill me. Then I had to know and believe that I didn't want to die, because alongside addiction comes a whole mountain of shame and maybe some co-diagnoses with mental health, which I certainly had, that can lead to suicidal ideation, and certainly unfortunately, that's how this ends up for a lot of people. And so I think that's the most important thing that you have to try and keep in mind. I know I have to keep in mind is that it is a deadly, deadly disease. And I know that that I wouldn't be here if I hadn't treated it. So yeah.
Was there one of the things Bo and I spoke about in our podcast interview is talked about the different kind of addicts, and we talked about addiction specifically in the performing arts industry. And he kind of drew this connection between addiction and actors, addiction and artists, because some of it was performance enhancing and that kind of thing. For you, was there a direct connection between performing and addiction?
So I think I don't know that it's actually true that there is a sort of higher percentage of addiction in performing arts or whatever. I think it's maybe more noticed or seen because obviously we know famous people, and that's where celebrity is and everything. But every industry, every career, every type of person has just as much of a chance of being affected by this disease because it doesn't discriminate. I do think that being in the arts and in the performing arts, what that can do is it can heighten your sensitivity towards life and experiencing life and wanting to get to different emotional highs and places and things like that. I'll say that I can't say that I never went on stage drunk or high, but I did. It was not a common practice for me. I always took that, and I've always taken that part of what I do very seriously. But being an active addiction hindered my ability to actually take it as seriously as I wanted to, because it eats up time, it eats up resources, it eats up mental space, and all of those things. And even in recovery, I've had to make sure that my motivations for being on stage are what they need to be. That it's never about wanting to escape from my life, which is surely the motivation I had for a large part of my life, was going on and seeing that really believing that my only value in the world was on stage, that my only value that I was bringing to the world was in performing. Mm-hmm. And that was a dangerous place to be, because you think rejection is bad for a healthy spiritual person. When that's your only value, when you feel like that's the only place that you have any value, it's absolutely devastating. So one of the gifts of being in recovery is to realize where my value is really in the world. And that's part of it. It is part of how I think I I leave the world better than I found it and provide usefulness. Mm-hmm. But when I think about my life today, that is not where I place, my biggest value. My value is in the relationships I have with my closest people. And frankly, the most important work that I'll ever do in my life is to stay sober and help other people get and stay sober. Far more important than any artistic value or anything else that I do in this world.
I love that you said that, and I'm hoping that this conversation and the conversation, following up on the conversation I had with Bo, will really help people, because I think these are important conversations to have. May I ask, what age did you start drinking?
I actually didn't start really using substances, alcohol and drugs. I drank a little bit when I was in high school, and then a little bit at the beginning of college. It wasn't until about my sophomore year of college that my behavior became to be addictive behavior. I started to drink alcoholically, and the way you recognize that is when you start to see priorities in your life shift, and consequences that start happening in your life that you can draw a direct line to the substance abuse. So that's when the addictive behavior began. So I guess I was about 21, 22.
Was alcohol a gateway to other drugs?
So I don't like the term gateway because people can become drug addicts without ever having a drink. People can drink all their lives without ever, picking up a drug. And I've seen everything in between. I've got periods of addiction with different substances throughout my life. Alcohol was pretty much a through line all the way through, with only, a couple maybe periods here and there where I wasn't drinking as much. But that was always, what I would call my drug of choice, for the majority of my life and behavior.
Mm. How I want to ask you, being an actor, there's cast parties, people unwind by going to a bar after a show. There's a lot of celebration of revolving around drinking and celebrating. How do you navigate that as an actor if you're going to how do you navigate that? And I guess for actors who might be watching this, who are in that situation of feeling like they are an addict, they have this problem, and then they don't know how to navigate these situations. I guess, can you speak to life on the other side, on the recovery side, how you navigate those situations?
Yeah, well, it's not always been easy, but when I think about it today, I don't think about it a lot today, because I think the myth that I told myself for so long was that I wasn't me, or I didn't have a life if I weren't doing a certain number of things. So that life sober just meant nothing, or these are just all these myths that is just, it's addict thinking, and it's all designed in ways to sort of stay in addiction. So for me, the way I sort of I talked about to people is I don't have a serious problem with being around alcohol, right? So like if I'm out to dinner with family or whatever and things, and they might have a drink, but I always and this is my behavior. No one else is responsible for it. My danger situations are being around intoxicated people, and so I always make sure that I'll avoid potential situations like that, or I'll leave situations like that. Being around really intoxicated people is like looking in a really twisted rearview mirror that does me no good. So I don't go to those situations. I also, and then even in recovery, the times that I have sort of like taken maybe a risk and like said, okay, well, let me go to this cast party or this thing or whatever, I've just found that it's also like, I'm not missing much. I don't, I'd prefer to be going somewhere else, and maybe that's just me. I mean, I'm a fairly gregarious person, but I just haven't missed it all that much. And I also don't think that I've missed out on the relationships and building and forming the relationships and familial sense that you get in theater that I always had before. I might have castmates that disagree with me, but I've always felt that I've been able to still establish even better relationships now, that mean more and that are more lasting, because they weren't greased up by alcohol or something else. It was all about the experience of being in the space and doing the work together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the key points, and this is actually the part of the conversation with Bo that I really want to talk about with you, because this is the part of the conversation that received the most response from our audience. Bo talked about the people who enabled him, and the people who enabled him were not the people selling him drugs. The people who enabled him were his family members who were giving him a couch to sleep on or bailing him out.
Mhm.
Um, I, I, I would guess there are some people who have close family or friends who are addicts who are watching this, and they love these people, they love their friends, they love their families so much, and they really don't know what to do. So I guess, can you talk first about the enablers, and second, having been in this part of your journey of recovery, what would you say to people who maybe have a family member or a friend who is an addict, and they don't know how to help them?
So absolutely. I'll just say that and this is just me. This is not any, professional thing or anything I actually even heard anywhere else. But I kind of take issue with the word enabler, because I feel like it immediately sets up folks who are loved ones of people in recovery. It sets them up for as already failing, and they don't even know what they're doing. You know what I mean? And so I'm a freak about language too. So I don't know what the right word is for it. But the behavior that you're talking about is just natural, normal, human loving behavior, which is trying to love somebody the best that you can with the tools that you have at the moment. And just like the person in active addiction doesn't know enough about addiction, doesn't know yet that is a progressive disease that will eventually lead to death untreated. The people around them know even less about it because they haven't even experienced it. They're just seeing someone suffer. They're seeing someone that they love suffer. And so the behaviors that people refer to as an enabling, which is the supporting and, and bailing them out and all of those things, they're perfectly natural human responses to people you see that you love suffering. Now, that doesn't mean that doesn't take away from the fact that it can prolong the active addiction, because I know that it would have taken me a lot longer to get sober if I had not had the privilege of experiencing my own consequences for my own behavior. And everyone has the right to experience their own consequences. And if you deny somebody the consequences of their behavior, then there's just no reason for that behavior to change. The only time that we change, and this is not just addiction, this is just human behavior. We will not change any of our behaviors unless the pain of staying the same becomes too great. It's got to be uncomfortable to stay the same. And so, that's the way I'll say. What I'll say about that. There's all sorts of navigating relationships. That's why there is all sorts of other recovery programs for people who are loved ones of people in addiction. Or people who grew up with alcoholic family members and are coming to or dealing with that as adults. There are all sorts of support groups and things out there for people like that. So I don't like giving advice, but if someone is out there that is seeing you have a loved one that's going through it, just educate yourself. Read up as much as you can about addiction if you believe that's it, and just learn as much as you can, and really, really focus on what your behavior is and what your motivations are and what your feelings are. And when I'll say this, one of the best pieces of advice that I got from a therapist when I was still in active addiction, and I'm very close with my family, and so my family was going through it too. And I remember a therapist, talking to my parents at one point, said, when we're talking about this, just deal with the facts. Just deal with the facts, and let's keep it at that level as much as possible, so that you can, when you can, temper those emotions, which is really, really difficult when you love someone.
It is very difficult, and then the relationship changes as well. I there's a lot of things I think we don't talk about as much as we should. Mental illness is one of those. I went through a period of my life where I was clinically depressed, and I had a significant other at the time, a partner at the time, who took care of me. And he helped me get out of bed. He helped me go to class. He helped me do all the things that I was unable to do for myself. But the interesting part of it was, as I went through recovery, our relationship changed a lot. And I realized he loved the depressed person. He didn't love the strong, independent woman that I actually am, because he never knew me to be that way. And so it's really interesting too, how the relationships change and how it affects everybody around you, not just the person going through it. So I love that that you mention your family, and that it's a communal thing. It's not just.
Oh, I mean, and I'm sure we'll probably get to it, but the prime, sort of directive of 12-step recovery, as far as I'm concerned, sort of where it started and everything, is connection with other people, and I wish I could remember the quote or an article that came out a couple of years ago that I saw, that, like, the most dangerous part of addiction is not the substance, it's the isolation. Because that is, the one thing that I think I've seen in every single person that I have witnessed and talked with and worked through getting sober with is that the progressive part of the disease is that you get more and more isolated, and that's how it ends. And so it only makes sense that the antidote of that is connection with other people.
Connection.
Yeah.
So something I've been thinking about a lot lately, in the last year, is we're all isolated. We're all disconnected right now. COVID has presented a very interesting paradigm in distance and social distance. And we're actors, we're theater people. We love to touch and hug and connect with each other. And this has been a very, it's felt, at least for me, a little bit disconnected from everybody. That's why I'm doing these live chats, because I wanted that connection. I was
a lot disconnected.
So talk about the difficulty, the danger in experiencing physical social distance, physical isolation, physical distance from family, friends, the people you have these relationships with, and how that impacts being a recovering addict.
Mm-hmm. It's so, the touchstone, the hallmark of 12-step recovery is getting into rooms with people who have had similar experiences with you and talking about it, making those connections, and telling each other stories about what it was like, and what it's like now and what happened. And that, to begin with, above everything else that happened, was the scariest part of this pandemic, was immediately that lifeblood force of what we need as addicts to stay alive was ripped away from us. We're also very dramatic people, so we gnashed our teeth and wrung our hands a lot about it, until somebody was just like, "Hey, we could do Zoom." Which, and of course we did, because like I said, this is a deadly disease. So I want to stay alive, so I got to treat my disease. Moving that online is not ideal, and it's certainly not the way that I want it to go forever. But I'll say two things. The other scariest part to me about this was the number of people that are out there that then all of the new folks who don't have a place to go, because it was such an important step for me, and I know it was for a lot of people, to physically walk into a room and sit down with other people and admit that I was struggling, and then have them tell me their struggles. That's such a huge, important step. And, it's no surprise that the rates of addiction and the rates of addiction-related deaths and things have all gone up. And because we are forcibly isolated, and it's a tragedy. People talk about the sort of silent pandemics and all these other sort of fallout things. There are lots of different, impacts that this is having on our species that we won't fully understand for years to come. That being said, there are also really, sort of things that I look at over this past year that I'm really proud of, that I'm really, that I was surprised by, the miracles that I've seen, and, some of the innovative ways that people have really, really worked to get healthy and stay healthy, in all regards. And so, those are the things that I focus on, and I just make sure that I'm keeping my health paramount first, and then making sure that my hand is out and ready to help whenever, wherever I can and however I can, because that's just as much, that's just as much of a part of recovery, is doing that.
And would you have anything you could share with the person who is at the beginning of their journey, or they haven't walked into that room yet and they're struggling alone at home? What do you say to them about?
Yeah. So there are resources available. There are hotlines available. I've worked some of those hotlines, and I've talked to plenty of people, so I know that people use them. And when people are at sort of their lowest, and at that point where they're able to reach out for help, we've got to make sure that there's a place for them to go. And so there are resources online. That's the other thing that's sort of a miracle about this, is that there are now, like, at any moment of any 24-hour period, you can go online and get in a room with other addicts who are recovering all over the world, and connect in that way. And so in some ways that's a new experience, something that's going to be a net gain when we get out of this, is connections that I know that I've made with people all over the place, in recovery. Yeah. And I think just reach out when you've got the impulse, when you receive and feel the impulse that you're struggling, and you're ready to wave the white flag, which is the most important thing any of us can do when we're struggling, is to pull out a white flag and say, I need help. Somebody help me. Just follow that notion and seek help.
And you did, I will say, after that podcast with Bo, you did share a lot of resources with me, and I will repost those links when I repost this conversation as well, so people can find a place to start. When I was doing a little research into the 12-step program of recovery program, there were two words associated with it. There was sobriety. I understand that one.
Mm-hmm.
And serenity.
Mm-hmm.
And the serenity piece really surprised me. I get stuck on words too. So serenity, I was like, I had to do a double take. So talk to me about the serenity aspect of this.
Well, I think it's a lot of people have probably heard the Serenity Prayer. So I don't know if it started with 12-step recovery, but the Serenity Prayer, give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot, serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. So I imagine that's the context when you probably saw it. When I think of serenity, I think of it, it's just the opposite of the chaos that was my life. And chaos is, a lot of times we'll use the word tornado of our past or whatever, that sort of chaos. One of the sort of epiphany, ray of light moments for me in recovery at one point early on was that I knew that the hallmark and the barometer of my recovery was a feeling of safety, just because of how terrified I had spent most of my life. And so feeling safe and serene, because those go hand in hand for me, that's how I know that it's working for me. That I feel safe in my skin, I feel safe in my world, I feel safe in my space, and because of that, I'm able to be serene and do that too. But it's I think that word probably came just as a antithetical to the way that life is for active addiction, which is just mired in chaos and destruction, all of that.
One thing I've enjoyed about following you on social media is, yes, you are an amazing actor and performer, but you're an artist as well. You do other art forms, from I don't want to say crochet. It's cross stitch to origami. So,
Yeah.
what has 2020 taught you about yourself and creativity?
I'm not going to give 2020 that power.
All right.
2020 can suck it. No, I picked up needle crafts and some other sort of just craft things a couple years ago, actually. And I don't really know what it was, other than I was kind of tired of dredging in for the TV and binging and things like that, and just felt restless and needed something to do with my hands. And my grandmother was an amazing and prolific needleworker, and so I just picked it up, and it really has just opened up this whole side of myself that I just didn't know it was there before. I've always felt pretty sure that I am supposed to be a performer and singer and actor and dancer and musician and all of these things, and they come naturally to those. But I always thought of myself as visually stupid when it came to certainly drawing or visual arts or things like that. So that's sort of where that came from. And I know for a fact, it's the opposite of active addiction, that's for sure. But, I will say that one of the things that I learned, like I talked about, staying involved and actually upping some involvement in my recovery practices over the past year has been amazingly important to me. But one of the other things that it's also reminded me of how foundational storytelling is to so much in life. But certainly, like I alluded to before, that's how 12-step recovery started, was sharing your struggles and stories with someone else, and then making that connection with them. That is where the magic happens. There are 12 steps, and there are all of these other things and everything, but that is where the magic happens. And that is that's exactly what I miss, and what is so vital and important about theater and about performing arts is sharing our human experience and the human condition, with each other, to help and better understand not just each other, but ourselves. If you're able to go in there and take what you see from a well-told story and see where the overlap is with your life, or where there's no overlap with your life, and then become excited about learning other people's stories. Mm-hmm. Because it is exciting to know that there are other stories and that there are other ways of living and other perspectives. It's invigorating to know that and to learn those things. it's just another one of those things that in the absence, we have not had live theater, but we have not stopped storytelling. The stories that have come out of this past year, and the way that we've told them to each other, and the way that we've experienced them, and the way that we've connected with each other, it is even more important and more vital. And so it certainly hasn't killed anything, but it just reminded me that it's we're just nothing without it. We really are. We are just nothing without it, because also without it, we end up in that isolation place that I talked about, that addiction will take people, and will take any of us, is to complete and total isolation. And biologically, physically, spiritually, we're just not built to live that way.
It is so true. And I think for me, theater is about building empathy. And I think when we share stories with one another and listen to the stories of other people, it teaches us empathy, and it teaches us compassion. And it's so important. I miss it so much. Brian, I cannot wait to get back to a theater and watch you and fellow performers on stage. So thank you. And thank you for your candor. I feel like these conversations are as important as the really fun conversations that we have on this platform. I think this kind of conversation is so important.
Yeah. And I thank you again for it too. And I just want to say that, like, it's the anonymity with which that I speak about 12-step recovery, and a lot of that is all still a result of the stigma that there is around addiction and mental health, and all of these things that science hasn't been able to provide a solution for, that we've kind of had to go off on our own and with our own tribes figure out solutions for. So, when we're talking, if you were struggling with addiction, or if you're out there and you're struggling with a loved one with addiction, first, just try and get rid of that stigma that you've got attached to it, and deal with the person and the spirit and the heart that's in front of you, because it's an unfortunate barrier to recovery when we can't get past the shame of something like that. So I wanted to make sure I said that.
Thank you for that, and again, thank you for your candor. I think the more we talk about these things, the more we destigmatize them, if that's even a word. So,
Absolutely, it's a word.
So when do I get to see you on stage again? What's next?
I don't have anything in the docket right now. I did a concert with my dear sister A. Wallace back in October for NRACT. This is the last time I got on stage and did something. So I don't know. I wanted to come back, but to be honest with you, I don't know, it's ebbed and flowed. The past year, there's times where I've just been desperate to get on stage, but I'm in a point right now where I'm really desperate to be in an audience. I'm really desperate to go and be wild and seen and see something, and so I'm waiting for that. Working on some things that might come to pass in the summer. We'll see. But Lord knows I'll be around. I won't be able to stop.
I sure hope so. I sure hope so, because, like I said, your performances are so memorable, and you just put it all out on stage, no matter what you're in, and that's what I appreciate. Even if I haven't loved the production, I'll usually walk away going, "Man, he's so good." He's so good. So
thank you. And thank you for all that you do for keeping this. I mean, you really have this. Well, that's what I mean. We haven't stopped telling stories. You've been a huge part of that in the theater world in the past year. And there really would be a massive hole in what we understand and know about our theater community without the work that you've done. So thank you very much. You don't get thanked enough. Please keep doing it.
Thank you. I've had a really tough day today, so I really appreciate. Usually I'm like, okay, forget it. I will receive that today though, because I need that
Good.
right now. So
Good.
thank you.
Absolutely.
And thank all of you for watching. I hope I hope this conversation has been helpful. I feel like it will be for folks. And I will post the resources that Brian shared with me for that podcast episode. If you tuned in late, please watch it from the beginning. Watch this interview from the beginning, either here on Facebook, on YouTube, or I'll post it on the website as well. You can see it there. And thank you so much, Brian, for hanging out with me on a Monday night.
Anytime, every time. Thank you, Lauren.
And everyone come back Thursday. Juan Isler will be back with another Torn Theater on Racist Negativity. We have a really fun event coming up next week, and I want to kind of give you guys the heads up on this. It's a registration event, so it's free, but you have to register. And we will be coloring. My friend Andrea and I from Coloring Broadway, we will be coloring and talking about mindfulness, and we'll have some special Hamilton guests joining us. I'm sure, knowing Andrea the way I do, we'll be talking about Bridgerton. So you can be in the Zoom where it happens, be hanging out with us in the Zoom, but you have to register with us. And then Andrea will forward you some coloring pages and we'll be good to go. So that's next Wednesday night. I will put a link to that on our Facebook page as well. And please join us. Those coloring events have been really fun. It's fun to color with a group of people. You never know, Brian. This is what I've learned during the pandemic. It's really fun to color with people.
We are learning lots about ourselves.
See, thank you again. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Brian, just stay safe and healthy. I so appreciate you. And have a good night. Thanks everyone. We will see you on Thursday.